Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ask Dr. Pickel show, where we help people find answers to chronic health issues, chronic health problems. All right, so today, kind of an interesting topic here. We're going to talk about, and you hear about so many different descriptions and words for this, heartburn, reflux, indigestion, acid stomach, acid reflux, GERD. And the common complaints are, hey, I get, my stomach feels burning, or my chest hurts or burns or feels pressure, or my throat feels like acid's coming up or feels swollen, or I can taste the acid come up into my mouth, or quite a wide range, but it can be pretty darn uncomfortable. I mean, that stuff, if heartburn hits you, it can kind of knock you down. It can get pretty severe. So, and when patients come to us and they say, hey, I've got heartburn, either I've had it recently or it's been chronic and I've had it for a long time, or, all kinds of different scenarios. And then they'll say, oh, I went to the doctor. He told me that I have too much acid in my stomach. And so, and maybe even prior to them going to the doctor, they've taken some antacids from the drugstore, or when they go into the doctor, he'll prescribe them an antacid drug, what's called a PPI, or proton pump inhibitor. So all these different scenarios exist, and there's some problems with that, because I hate to say, if you watch the commercials about heartburn, they really don't tell you the whole story. They don't tell you. They say, oh, you've got acid stomach, you need to take this. Are we supposed to have acid in our stomach? Let's talk about that. Let's actually tell the whole story here if we're going to kind of talk about these types of issues, because there's a lot of things that go on in this first part of our digestive tract, not only in the stomach and the esophagus, but also in the kind of the beginnings of the small intestine, because it's so important that we digest and break down our food. If we eat something, we need to be able to digest it and utilize it. Otherwise, it ends up in the toilet. And, especially important foods, if we're trying to eat proteins, fats and oils, minerals, vitamins, we need to be able to digest and absorb things so we can absorb those into our system so we can use them. Now, certain things really don't need acid. I mean, your carbohydrates, and especially your simple carbs, and then your sugars. I mean, those things are going to break. Let's put it this way: if you put sugar in water, what happens? I mean, it dissolves. It's gone. You don't need a lot of special acidity or pH changes or anything like that. That just dissolves. That'll get right into your gut pretty easily. But that's the problem, is if these issues are occurring, if you're getting heartburn, reflux, and all these indigestion, all these things, you're probably not digesting these foods you eat. You could think, gosh, I'm eating so healthy. I'm eating this great salad today, but it can end up in the toilet, except for maybe the sugars you got from that, and the carbs that broke down to sugars, and then also maybe what was in the dressing that turned into just a sugar and you absorbed easily, but you didn't get all the benefits of that wonderful meal that you just purchased or made and just ate. All right, so let's get a little deeper into this. So we got to this digestive tract right here. And in this digestive tract, there's a few things going on in this. If you look at kind of that gray area, it's kind of hard to see up towards the top. That's the stomach. And in fact, at the very top of the picture in the middle, there's the esophagus. So the esophagus is that tube that your food goes down to your stomach, goes to your stomach. Stomach connects to your small intestine. That's kind of the pink area below the really largest part, which is surrounded more by the large intestine. Now, if you look under the gray area of the stomach, there's also a little yellow area, and that's your pancreas. And then up above the kind of the very end of the stomach, you're going to see a green thing, and that's your gallbladder, and then above that's your liver. All right, so these all kind of play an important part in this whole scenario. So let's say I eat a sandwich, and that sandwich goes to my stomach. Now, what's going to happen is when that sandwich gets to my stomach, actually even before, actually when I start chewing food, which is called mastication, when you start chewing food, your digestive system is already saying, hey, we've got something coming down the pipe here. Get things prepared, get ready for it. So then your stomach starts to increase acid production. Now, we make our own acid. It's called hydrochloric acid, and we need this acid. It's pretty darn important that we have it because that's how we break down our foods. But the neat part about it is our stomach, our esophagus, our small intestine, they're really built for this acid. Hydrochloric acid doesn't burn your stomach. Maybe if you've already got an ulcer from taking too much NSAID drugs or something, yeah, if you break through that lining in your stomach, it could burn, but the lining of your stomach is built for hydrochloric acid and produces it. So very important. Now, the scenario is if you've got a normal amount of acid, breaks down your food. Also, that acid triggers your pancreas to make some digestive enzymes. Also, that acid triggers your gallbladder to contract and release bile, which breaks down fats and oils. So what happens though if we aren't making enough acid in our stomach? Because really this is the scenario. Actually, there's two scenarios. One of them that's involved in ingestion, heartburn, reflux, all these things is either we're not making enough acid or we're not making enough digestive enzymes, or they're not making enough, but we're not releasing them properly into the proper environment, issues which we're going to get into here in a second. So if you're not making enough acid in your stomach, you eat that sandwich, it goes down to your stomach and it just sits there. Now the acid, maybe you got a little bit of acid, but not much. But what's going to happen in that stomach? Well, first of all, the internal temperature of our body is close to 100 degrees. I mean, we're pretty close. So what happens when you set food in close to 100 degree temperature inside a sealed chamber? Because let's put it this way, when you make acid, that hydrochloric acid, that actually tells the little valve between your esophagus and your stomach, the sphincter closes, the valve closes because of the acid. So if that valve closes, now we're in a kind of a pressurized system, close to 100 degrees. If we got plenty of acid, yeah, that food breaks down quickly. If we don't have enough acid, what does that food do at 100 degrees? It starts to ferment. It starts to rot. I know that sounds horrible, but it will ferment and rot pretty quickly. And if it ferments and rots, then and sometimes just sits there, when something ferments, what does it make? It makes other types of acids, bad acids, organic type acids, acids that our stomach lining isn't built for. And it also makes gases. And so those gases also have to escape. So usually when people have these issues too, a lot of times, not only do they get the reflux or the heartburn or things like that, but also they're saying, hey, I'm burping a lot or I'm farting a lot. And so again, you know, these things are, these gases have to escape. But again, if we aren't breaking down, if we're not making enough acid, we get the bad acid. And also what happens if we don't make enough acid, the valve doesn't close. That sphincter doesn't close. And so then acid can come back up too. So this is a big problem with the reflux type person there who's feeling it in their chest or the throat or it's coming up into the mouth. Now, here's the problem also. If you don't make enough acid, acid is what triggers your pancreas to, hey, release some digestive enzymes. Now, there's a switch though, because suddenly when your pancreas releases digestive enzymes, it actually, right before it does that, in the small intestine, it spits out a little bit of what's called bicarbonate, because it changes the pH. So again, it's very important that the pancreas is working too. And in fact, if the pancreas makes these enzymes, it's very important that it releases them properly too, and that bicarbonate's there and the acid's correct. I mean, the last thing we want is for the enzymes to break down the pancreas. We don't want to digest our own pancreas, which really doesn't doesn't happen, but could, because they're proteolytic enzymes. So the thing is, though, is we release these digestive enzymes into our small intestine at a different pH, a more alkaline pH, and then the enzymes start to break down our food even further. And then if there's fats and oils in there, there are some enzymes that help with that, like lipase. But then that bile, the hydrochloric acid, also stimulates the gallbladder to contract. We release bile, and that bile helps to also emulsify and break down those fats, so we can start to absorb all this stuff that we, it's amazing what goes on behind the scenes in our own body that happens every day that we don't even see or know about. It's very interesting stuff. But again, if we don't have enough acid, we don't trigger the enzymes properly. We don't trigger the gallbladder to release properly. Actually, all kinds of things don't occur. And then there's reasons that maybe the stomach's not producing enough acid too. Now, again, there is, let's kind of go back a little though, that it's number one with reflux is important that, like I said, we make enough acid to close what's called that lower esophageal sphincter. Again, if it stays open, we can get the reflux and the valve isn't closing. Also, when we make hydrochloric acid, kind of interesting here, our body makes per day about 2.5 quarts of this stuff. It's a lot of acid that we make per day. So very important that we have the elements, the raw elements to make that, which HCl, hydrogen and chloride. So again, which are pretty abundant. But again, a lot of it's because our cells in our stomach are either inflamed or having problems and they're not making enough of that. Or there's some other factors that we're going to get to in a minute that can affect our ability to make it. And, talking about fluids anyway, we said it's about 2.5 quarts of acid a day. Well, actually the digestive process from top to bottom between our mouth, our esophagus, our stomach, our small intestine, our large intestine, that's about 3 gallons of fluid per day, of different fluids that are produced by our digestive tract to digest foods on a regular basis. Now again, do we lose all that fluid? No, it's reused, a lot of it, but it shows you how much. It's amazing what our body actually does on a daily basis. So one thing, let's talk about kind of what can affect this acidity, because the problem is a lot of the foods that we eat can mess up this not only hydrochloric acid balance, but also the ability to make those digestive enzymes properly. So probably one scenario I like to bring up is if a person has high stress. If you have high physical stress, emotional stress, chemical stress could be medications, things you're taking, things you're drinking, stuff that's putting stress on your body. Any of these stressors will, and especially if it's like emotional stress or physical stress or trauma, these things will decrease acid production. They activate what's called your fight or flight system, your sympathetic nervous system. Now, if you activate that fight or flight system, which is mainly supposed to happen when you're running from a bear, if you're not running from a bear, you're just sitting in a chair and you're like, I'm anxious, my heart's racing. Yeah, not good. That's your fight or flight system usually that's activated. If you're running from a bear, your body says, shut down the digestive tract, divert blood flow to other areas because we need it. Forget digestion. Well, yeah, if you're running from a bear, that's important. But if you're not running from a bear, then you need that blood flow going to your gut. You need nervous system stimulation to your gut. You need what's called your rest and digest system to work, your parasympathetic nervous system. So people who have anxiety issues, people who are in that fight or flight mode more often, you're going to have digestive issues. It's going to happen. If you have a high stress life, you're going to probably have digestive issues. If you have chronic health issues that drive inflammation and pain, these also activate that fight or flight system. So another factor that can do this that is extremely common and rarely checked, and it frustrates the heck out of me, is sometimes there's certain bacteria that can increase their populations in your stomach. There's a bacteria that lives in our stomach and it's called H. pylori. Also, the other name for it is Campylobacter. But this bacteria, actually, everybody has some of this bacteria living in our stomach. It actually is a scavenger at one point, and we need it. But if our immune system drops, if something compromises the immune system in our stomach, this bacteria can grow. It can start to damage the lining of our stomach, and it can affect our ability to make acid. And there's an easy test that can be done for this, where you go into a lab, you breathe into this bag, and after you drink this fluid, you breathe into this bag, it off gases a certain thing there, and if it can show positive or negative on these bacteria. There's also a stool test that can be done for it too. So again, always, if you've got chronic heartburn, indigestion, acid stomach, acid reflux, get tested for that bacteria, H. pylori. Very common issue. Another, probably even the bigger thing though in most people, is diet. And nobody wants to talk about this. The diet is a big part, and the diet is so important. I mean, you know, one thing that we need are foods that help our digestive tract. Biggest ones are veggies. And, you know, if I go to the grocery store, well, let's put it this way. It's been said that if everybody ate the amount of veggies they're supposed to per day, the area of the grocery store where they keep all of the vegetables and fruits, they wouldn't be able to keep up. They would run out. How often does that happen? You know, when I go to the grocery store, everybody's like in the chips aisle or the cereal aisle or things like that. You know, I'm not trying to be a downer here, but again, diet plays a big part in this. If you eat junk, it's going to have negative effects on these digestive processes. Another common one I'll see is coffee. So a lot of times, let's say we're eating breakfast and start to drink coffee. Now think about this. Coffee has a pH, we're talking about acidity here, of about 5.0. Neutral acidity is about a 7. So now when you drink coffee at this acidic state, and coffee doesn't have to be digested by the stomach, it's going to go straight into your small intestine. Well, if I'm trying to change the acidity of my small intestine by releasing bicarbonate from my pancreas, and I just put coffee in there because I need my digestive enzymes to have the right pH to work, what's that coffee going to do to my digestive enzymes? They're definitely not going to be very active. It'll probably just ruin them. So now I'm not digesting my food well. So that's one thing, one big thing there that I see happen very often with people. And, you know, this can happen with other things too that change the pH of your digestive system. I mean, really, on this scale of pH, you know, I said coffee's at a 5, you know, and actually the pH scale is what we call logarithmic, meaning that if we start at 7 and we go to 6, that's a 10 times difference. If we go from 7 to 5, that's 100 times difference in acidity. Pretty big. So coffee could make your digestive system 100 times more acidic than what you need. And it's not going to be the acidity that we need in the stomach to help digest our food. No, that's going to go straight into your small intestine and ruin some of those digestive enzymes. So, we need those pHs to be proper, and our diet plays a big part. In fact, talking about coffee, if we think about that acidity of coffee, how much water do you think it takes to neutralize the acidity of an 8-ounce cup of coffee? 1 gallon. That's a lot of water to neutralize that acid. So yeah, there's a lot of acidity in that. All right, so back to the point here. Okay, so when we eat food, we need to be able to break it down with the good acid in our stomach. We need to digest it with the proper enzymes and bile in our small intestine. If those aren't occurring, then we digest more or we absorb more sugars and carbs. The proteins, the fatty acids, the minerals, those are big molecules. They aren't going to digest and break down if we don't have those processes. The sugars and carbs, they'll go right in. And this is another factor that goes into this. So if you're mainly absorbing sugars and carbs, what's that going to do to your blood sugar? it's going to rise. So if you start to have problems like pre-diabetes, diabetes, one factor here can be you're mainly absorbing sugars and carbs. You're not digesting your food properly. So this can be a total factor here. And that's why a lot of people change their diet and, hey, my digestion is better. So again, there's all these factors here and all these potential problems. But the thing is making sure that the environment's right in your stomach to digest. And then one more factor also is that when you take some of these antacid type meds, what's that doing? That's suppressing all the acid. Then it's all gone. You took care of the HCl, the good acid, any that was there, and you took care of the bad acid too that was causing the reflux and the heartburn and the indigestion. But again, it really didn't help the cause of the problem. The thing that it did though is if you have to take that on a regular basis, you're alkalizing your stomach all the time. That's why if you look at the indications and the side effects on those lists, it's scary because then we get malnutrition, maldigestion. We start to get all kinds of the, one of the big side effects is osteoporosis. So again, why is that occurring? Because you're not absorbing and breaking down minerals. So, I mean, there's all kinds of negative effects to these. In fact, the list is about a mile long. So, short term, can they help? But are there other ways? Are there other things you can do for this? And that's the thing, is finding out what's behind this. Is it stress? Is there a reason you're not digesting? Do you have something that's causing inflammation in your gut or inflammation in your stomach? Do you have a high stress response? Your fight or flight system's on, and why? So it's just, and that's what we do here, is we find out what is the reason behind it, eliminate those issues, heal the gut, get you digesting properly so you can absorb what you eat, or otherwise this becomes an endless chain. Another factor I just thought of that I want to add in here towards the end, I know we're going a little ways here, is energy. If you're a person who is tired a lot, chronic fatigue, you have fatigue due to your pain levels, due to your health conditions, due to, you're just tired all the time. Well, you have to have energy to produce these things. So again, if your energy's low, it isn't going to happen. You're not going to make hydrochloric acid in the amount you need to. Gut function is going to be slowed. There's all kinds of little elements here. So then we've got to find out, hey, why are your mitochondria not manufacturing energy? And that could be an issue with some different nutrients. So, all right. Well, I wanted to put all that together for you and give you that more truer story. And I hope everybody enjoyed today. I give a shout out to Sandy and Shelly and everybody else who's watching. And I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day, and God bless.